Immortal, invisible, God only wise, in light inaccessible, hid from our eyes. Lines from a hymn that capture the mystery of God. But in this scientific age, we become accustomed to proof. Is there any evidence for God? Adam Deen, Muslim philosophy, and quite a hand went up straight at the back. So I will be coming to that gentleman, but I'll come to you first, Adam Deen. Do we have any evidence for God?
Absolutely. There are tremendous amounts of evidence on the side of God. If we probe the observable universe, we will see signposts pointing to a transcendence. There are approximately...
Now, you're going to have to keep this simple for me, if you don't mind.
There are approximately 24 arguments for the existence of God, and I like to use two. The first is that we know now that the universe is not eternal in the past, but it has a finite beginning. That we know that the universe began to exist.
This is the Big Bang, yeah?
Absolutely, yes. And what the Big Bang indicates is that all physical space and time began at that point. Now, because the universe began to exist, it must have been caused, and that cause, by definition, must be outside the Big Bang. Also, that what we know now is that the initial conditions of the universe were delicately and exquisitely fine-tuned for the existence of intelligent life. What that indicates is that there is an intelligence behind the universe. So we have an originator and intelligence behind the universe that gives us good reasons to believe that God exists.
Okay, well, I'm going to keep my questions very simple here. So here's my next one. Why did it take so long then from the Big Bang to come up with humans? You know, why did plants and reptiles and dinosaurs and mammals precede us?
I mean, that's a question of what was in the mind of God to create human beings. That does not...
So he was working on it all those millions of years?
Well, he wasn't working on it. But what you have to understand, that doesn't... Even if we couldn't come out with an answer for that, that wouldn't show that God doesn't exist. Or that would say that there is a mystery around his mechanism, if you like. Well, the question is there any evidence for God's existence? And absolutely there is. The alternative is this. That in an era of science and reason, we're supposed to adopt the atheist position, which is that the universe just popped into existence uncaused, just by magic. I think that's an untenable position to maintain.
Okay, well, let's speak to an atheist then. That seems an appropriate thing to do. Professor Peter Atkins, the Big Bang, it must have been caused by something, and because this universe is so finely tuned for human life, it is evidence of an intelligent designer.
We've heard the evidence of a lazy mind, I'm afraid, not a thoughtful mind. The whole point about science is to work back to understanding how things took place. Now, I have to admit that at the moment we don't know how the universe came into existence at the moment of incipience. But look how far we've come in the past 100 years compared with how far religion has come in the past 3,000 years. It hasn't moved 1 inch towards understanding. All it does is to assert. It throws in the towel. It says, God did it. And that's an abnegation of the intellect. What scientists are doing are working back to within milliseconds with great authority towards microseconds, towards nanoseconds and so on, gradually working towards the moment of incipience. And that's the way to do it. It's not the way just to jump in and say, this is what happened. As to the fine-tuning, I mean, you need imagination. Science is all about imagination tempered with caution. And we haven't run out of ideas about why the universe is so well-tuned. It might just be luck. I mean, it might just be that we're here happily by luck.
A happy accident, madam.
Yeah.
Okay, but can I just say that this is a typical tactic from someone who I would consider a militant atheist. That is
It didn't say that on his badge, it has to be said, it just said atheist.
I'm familiar with Dr. Atkins' work. This is not a debate between religion and science.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not, and I'm not going... No, this is not.
Okay.
The arguments that I use in my debates and my lectures are based on science.
No,
Science dictates that the universe began to exist. Now, going back to this point about the fine-tuning, and it could be by accident, we have to think about the odds here. It is 10 to the power of 10 by the power of 123.
No, that's just a number that you
Roger Penrose said that we could not write that number down.
Yeah.
We could not write that number down because it exceeds the number of particles in the universe.
Sorry, the probability is 1.
Hang on, I mean, I'm not going to take all this on my shoulders. Is this convincing anyone? Is this going anywhere?
Much of the discussion of the existence of God is more like we are here, we can see each other, and we think of God as this Santa Claus type guy somewhere else. What if God is the ultimate foundation of everything? We cannot discuss. What if God is ultimate reality? So a better question, perhaps, is what is God like? And this evidence.
Everyone's questioning my questions today.
I was taking my son to the doctors, and the nurse or the doctor noticed that one of his legs was shorter than the other. So my wife pointed out that I had this problem when I was young, and just before I went into the surgery, my mom said that she'd been praying a long time, for 7 days actually, for this specific surgery, and asked the doctor to take another series of x-rays and so on, which he did, and found out that my leg was now normal. My mom looked at it as the evidence to prayer. The doctor I was talking to said that my hip must have been unlocked, and then it puts it in position. The point is, we look at the evidence, but that's all it is, because what you look for, you will find. If you want to look for something, you will find it.
Hang on, this lady here.
In 2008, the Royal College of Psychiatrists looked at what happens to people when they have a mental illness. And what they found was that people who had a faith, who believed in a transcendent being, were able to recover from that illness. Also, in the center of the brain, MRI scans show that when people meditate, when they pray, when they go through a worship experience, their pulse lowers, the blood pressure comes down. And people will give testimonies and evidence that believing in God has a psychological positive impact on their choices for health. We have health programs in our churches where people come in, we teach them how to eat well, rest and relax, and stress management. And when they realize that there's a God, there is a faith, it gives them positive outlook on life, it makes them, it enhances their life and their well-being to make positive choices. Science is now showing that, for instance, people, the Seventh-day Adventists have longevity, and part of that is their faith and their positive aspect in life. So science is showing
we could say that belief is valuable, we could conclude that belief is valuable, but that doesn't necessarily establish that there is evidence of God.
Yes. Well, I mean, if I may go back to what Peter has said, he says that religion hasn't gone on in 3,000 years, but actually religion has been the basis for the emergence of science itself. The view of an ordered universe, the view of an ordered universe where there are immutable laws stems from religious belief. Science has used that. That's wonderful that it's used it, but it should acknowledge its debt.
Yes, but of course we do acknowledge it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Immutable laws. Thank you very much. May I just finish? Immutable laws. You're talking about, you were asking why it took human beings so long to emerge from a primeval soup. That's because of the nature of the soup. In life, you have a reversal of matter's tendency to inertness. You have complexification, as Peter Atkins, I'm sure, will agree. You have convergence in evolution itself. You have cooperation within the species and among the species developing. You have then the emergence of consciousness, of conscious beings, and then of self-consciousness. Beings who can ask themselves, as we are doing this morning, why we are here at all. I mean, isn't that remarkable?
But I think what's also remarkable is that there is this God-shaped hole that you were talking about. And, you know, reason and rational deduction and scientific investigation can explain to us, for instance, all about sex and sexual urges, but they can't explain about love.
Yes, they can.
And that is the God-shaped hole.
Now, hang on, Peter Atkins is about to explain love, so please, pipe down.
I mean, there is nothing.
Let's hear it.
There is nothing that the scientific method cannot be applied to and fail to elucidate.
So tell us about love.
Hormones,
Professor Atkins.
Psychology. Yeah, that is the mode of an investigation to understand love.
Psychology on love?
I mean,
sorry, can I just...
Hang on.
Let's go back to the real question that we're supposed to be...
Well, no, I think we want you to explain love.
This is the real question, Professor Atkins.
Yeah, I will turn to a psychologist to explain love to
Oliver?
Okay, well, Christina, answer me, why is that such...
Hang on.
It's an important...
Well, Oliver, I will come to you, Oliver, he's a resident psychologist, but tell me, why is it the most important question?
Because I think love is the most important question, and I think God is the answer. It's the transcendence of love. And I'll tell you what else I think is really important about this debate. That Professor Atkins and his ilk are not only questioning the existence of God, but they can't tolerate our faith in God. And I think that that's one of the most important things about believing in God.
But there's two things, there's faith and there's evidence.
I think that whether there's scientific evidence or transcendental evidence, I think the most important thing about God is that those who believe in him should not be the target of mockery and prejudice and intolerance, and I think that that is the most important thing about God and our belief in God.
Equally, Christina, you took exception at Peter Atkins there, but there are people who might take exception at you because they would say, well, I don't have God in my life,
but I have love in my life. They shouldn't target
But I do have love.
Yes, I think that's absolutely fine. But we are explaining.
Hang on, Julia.
Exactly.
Go on.
No, science can give us the how. It can't give us the why.
Absolutely.
And we turn this on its head. How can you prove there isn't a God? But I think the greatest evidence for being God is transformed lives. People's lives who've been utterly changed through meeting with God and then taking a completely different path. And I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday.
Hang on, just a minute, but we need to hear. Go on, Julia.
Left school at 16. He said, I could use his story. Left school at 16, virtually no teeth, let alone any qualifications. Now, he's now working in Parliament with a doctorate, working amongst politicians, and his life has been utterly transformed by the fact that he met with Jesus. His life was completely changed by realising that Jesus was truth and the reality, and that completely changed his direction of travel in his life. And he's just one example amongst millions who have their lives transformed.
Did he believe that, or did he know that? Is that evidence, Kelvin?
What has definitely happened is that as education has become much wider, the truth about the matter is that the God issue, which is fantastic. I love people who have faith.
You're being very careful here, Kelvin.
I really love people who have faith. But the truth about the matter is that outside one religion that I can think of, actually the religion is declining as the centrepiece of a society. So an ill-educated society, a greater percentage went to church. As it becomes educated and people challenge, you couldn't go on television. You couldn't get an ad past Ofcom saying that God will do this for you, or you can walk on water if you support religion or anything. So you can't, in a educated consumer society, unfortunately, God actually is not allowed. And it's curious. I'm in favour of faith, but I am absolutely... Nobody can ever prove to me, which they could have proved to me in the 16th century, that there was a God. Today, honestly, we know more.
It's perfectly possible to prove it, and we've just heard how this can be done. But
well, Michael, how would you prove it to Kelvin?
It's just arrogance to say that we are now in an educated society. I mean, are you cleverer than Isaac Newton or Robert Boyle? Which of the great scientists are you cleverer than?
Well, frankly, I edited The Sun for a decade. I'm not sure Newton could have done that.
Sorry, can I...
Hang on, I want to come to James on this. There's lots of people talking here about the value of faith and the value of the belief and how it's transformed lives. Is there a human need to believe in something?
Probably there is, but there's no doubt at all about the scientific evidence. Reviews of all the literature show that you are statistically significantly less likely to suffer from a mental illness if you have a weekly religious observance. That doesn't prove, of course, that there's a God. No social scientist has ever come to that conclusion. But it does suggest, perhaps, that the ethical beliefs, the ethical system, the way of living your life that goes with regular religious observance, particularly being part of a community, is very protective against mental illness. Now, my question to the gent here
but that can be got out with religion, it has to be said.
What?
That can be got outside religion.
And it can be got outside religion. My question to the gent here is, he's a man of science. Science is all about probability. A proper scientist doesn't ever believe that anything is definitely true or definitely false. All you are dealing with is probability here. And I never understand why people who are real scientists, you and Dawkins is supposed to be a real scientist, why are you atheists? Why aren't you agnostics?
Yes.
I can understand. How do you know there isn't a God?
I will answer that if I'm given a moment to answer it.
Yes, please do.
I will take the simplest possible hypothesis. That is that there is no God. And I will invite everyone in this audience to bring forward evidence proof for me to build upon that simple
That is
belief.
not genuine.
So
Hang on,
being
please.
an atheist is the starting point, and it is quite wrong.
Why not an agnostic? Why don't you start from that?
Well, because that's, I think, being an atheist is a 0 point in the argument. You say, there is nothing, there is no God. But it is up to you to bring the evidence.
But that's
Just one thing. I want to move to Charles Foster. I mean, we seem to be having a real conflict here between science and faith, that they are mutually exclusive. We almost seem to. Would you agree with that?
Faith, if it's to be intelligent, God, if it's to be accessible, has to be got at by our minds, which, if we are believers, we are told are given to us so that we can grope towards him. So yes, we need a rigorous scientific inquiry. Of course, we should adopt, as Peter says, the simplest possible explanation for the world. It seems to me that the leaps of faith which Peter has to take in order to come to his view of the world are hugely greater than the leaps of faith which Adam, for example, has to take.
Let Charles explain that.
Let's go back to Adam's example. You say that it's ridiculous to assert that the universe's fine-tuning implies that there is some mind behind it. What are your alternatives to that? You have to say either that the immense improbability of all these things happening came into existence at once. A scientist wouldn't say that. The alternative is that you've got to say that there are trillions of other universes, each with their own internally consistent constants. Now, I just ask the audience rhetorically, which of those two hypotheses is the most probable? I adopt the scientific solution, and I say that the God hypothesis requires far less faith than the one which you are prepared to adopt.
Hang on, I just want to get some views here, so I'm really... sorry, Adam. Gentleman here.
Yes, I think the thing is we haven't talked about many of the pieces of evidence, whether we talk about the historical person of Jesus Christ who existed in history, who was seen by so many people, who was raised from the dead, 500 people saw him alive, a load of them are named at the time, a load of people could have, you know, sort of written things to contradict that at the time, hundreds of other pieces of evidence. We've talked about the existence of effects on people's lives, but there's this false dichotomy being created, and it's the biggest lie I think the world is being sold at the moment between science and the existence of Christianity and the truth of it, because the idea that the premise is that you cannot, that on the basis of science, you know, if you believe in God...
I'm going to have to wind you up. I do apologise because I'm with bated breath. Can I tell you one thing for certain and absolute? We ain't going to solve this in 20 minutes, and I'm really, really sorry, but thank you so much. All the debates continue on our message board. Join us next week from Birmingham. Goodbye.
More big questions next on BBC One, politics show style. BBC Two and BBC Radio 4 have live coverage of George Osborne's first budget as Chancellor on Tuesday from midday.
Catch live video, live commentary and live text commentary. All online at bbc.co.uk/World Cup. Where you can also predict, play, view highlights and see the excitement of the World Cup unfold in our